What's the worst defense you've seen someone make in a court? We had a guy in court when I worked in CPS who beat his kid with a belt. In court, he asked the judge if he could take off his belt and demonstrate how hard he hit his kid by using his jacket on the back of a chair. The judge was like, whatevs. Go for it. I was expecting him to half-as it, but the guy wailed on the chair until the bailiff told him, that's enough. The entire courtroom was like, holy shit dude. And that's how I got quite possibly the easiest child removal to date. Not that I had any thought I'd lose the case. The pictures were horrific and that kid will have scars from that beating for life. I took a guy to small claims court. His defense was, I didn't have the product, so I couldn't ship it to him. Obviously. The judge was like, but you took his money? The guy, yay. So I could buy the product and ship it to him. Judge, did you do that? Guy, not yet. Judge, do you have his money? Guy, no. I had an emergency and had to spend it. That was that. I won. Edit, someone gave me gold? Thanks. This was a very stressful period of my life. I saw this go down while waiting for my traffic ticket. Judge, so, you were seen pulling a stop sign out of the ground and throwing it in the river. Accused, yes, sir. J, were you drunk? No, sir. J, the ticket says you were intoxicated. No, sir. J, okay, let's say I believe you. I will throw out this drunken disorderly charge. Thank you, sir. J, but, I will have to charge you with the destruction of government property and endangering the public. That comes with at least a year in jail. So I'll ask one more time. Were you drunk? Yes, sir. Very drunk, sir. My sister told the judge that the light wasn't that red. Then he said he was going to suspend her license and she said, but my dad already took it away. I defended a guy on a DUI that jumped into the backseat after he got pulled over and claimed someone else was driving. He was the only one in the car. Aggravated criminal sodomy. The defense attorney said the grape only lasted for a minute. Edit, during closing argument to the jury. I never touched my daughters. I never hurt my daughters. Never would I sexually abuse my daughters. Except that one time at the cabin. The guy became an instant meme in our country, language. It says here you were drinking and driving, judge. No sir. I drank then I drove, a guilty guy. Domestic abuse case. The husband was the accused. The couple was in their late 70s or early 80s. When asked if he did indeed abuse his wife, the husband started complaining that some 40 years ago the wife pretended to be ill and he had to do the laundry all by himself. As if he expected the judge to just go, oh okay. I guess that's cool then. I was in traffic court and the first guy to go before the judge got pulled over doing some crazy speed. Like 140 miles per hour. The judge essentially told the guy to say he wouldn't ever do it again and that it was a mistake. And in return, the judge would drop the ticket fee and the points on his record. The guy countered with, well, I drive that fast all the time. So I'm really good at it. And I don't think it was dangerous at all because of how good of a driver I am. Guy could have walked out totally free, but instead got a $2,500 FNE and 2 points on his record. I watched a friend try a DWI case. Her client testified that she wasn't drunk while driving, and therefore not guilty, because she was actually high on meth at the time. My friend put her head down and started hitting her head against the desk. GUUUILLLLTTTTYYYYYY. Of course his DNA, semen, was in the alley behind his apartment where a sexual assault took place. Where else would you expect to find your DNA except where you lived? A friend of mine once got a ticket for leaving her car standing in the marked-off no parking zone in front of a grocery store, which she thought was outrageous because she was just running in to get a pack of smokes. Then she saw how much the ticket was for. Something like $120, which she thought was just ridiculous because damn it, she was just running in for a pack of smokes. I mean, come on, how is that worth $120? So her plan was to go to court and contest the ticket and point out to the judge how ridiculous that was and offer to compromise at like maybe $40 because for Pete's sake, she was just running in for a pack of smokes and let's be reasonable here. Yes, her plan was to haggle with the judge over how much the ticket should be worth. So she goes to court and sits there most of the day waiting for her case to be called. And eventually she gets bored and goes outside to grab a smoke and hang out. And while she's out there, her case is called. She missed the whole thing. Didn't even get to try the whole, come on, $120. For that, come on, I'll give you $40 and even that's highway robbery defense on the judge and got hit for the full value of the ticket plus court costs. I was a juror for a case against a woman that was charged with selling a stolen gum to a pawnbroker and possession of a gum by a convicted felon. She took the stand and admitted to finding the gum at a friend's house and taking it to the pawnbroker. Her attorney's entire closing argument was that the state failed to prove that it was a gum and the charges should be dropped. Never mind the fact that she admitted to it being a gum. The guy that owned the gum said it was his gum and we had it right there in front of us. The defense said it was not a gum because the state had not fired it to prove it was a gum. And of course, as soon as we get back to the room to deliberate, one of the other jurors said he was not convinced it was a real gum. That was a really long day. Edit. Wow, this is by far the most karma I've ever gotten on a comment. For those wondering, we had the gum in the jury room, but it was in a clear plastic box. We did have a bailiff come in at one point to take it out and pull the slide back. We were not allowed to handle it ourselves. Ted Bundy jumping out of the courthouse window and running probably didn't do much to convince people he was innocent. I knew a guy who said that the police who responded to the domestic that he had perpetrated had no right to charge him with meth possession since the meth was so pure. No one could have seen it. A guy was in court for a DUI, and he insisted on taking the stand when his lawyer advised him not to. Turned out he wanted the judge to know the cop who arrested him was just some rude kid trying to be a big shot, and he wasn't even drunk. He'd only had 2 bottles of wine with dinner. His lawyer interrupted him to try to get him to stop talking, and he told his lawyer to shut up. Then the judge advised him to listen to his lawyer. And he told the judge, "I'm not a damn child. Don't interrupt me," and the judge just smiled and sat back and said, "Please, proceed." We all knew it was over for this guy. He got maxed on the charge, and advised in the future if he was going to pay for a lawyer, he should listen to him. Sexual assault trial we had this past summer. Guy brutally raped a woman in a park, then took her bike and ATM card. A few minutes later he is recorded withdrawing $80 from her account. He is arrested within hours of the assault. At trial, he testified that the sex was consensual and the victim enjoyed performing oral on him so much that she gave him the bike and ATM card to show her appreciation, and that someone else came along and beat her after he left. He also practiced his planned testimony with an inmate who had just been sentenced on a gum charge and bragged about the sexual assault in detail. That inmate threw him under the bus and testified against him. Gum charge inmate freely admitted he hoped rapist would wind up in the same prison he did so he could hand out some rec-yard justice. Running dope and gums was one thing. He couldn't tolerate someone touching a woman. It didn't take long for a guilty verdict and life sentence. It was Independence Day, Your Honor. A day to celebrate the freedoms that our forefathers fought and died for. A day to celebrate what this country is. So yes, Judge, I did do some meth. For freedom. This was in a drug treatment court. Edit, stop encouraging him. TBH, the judge chuckled and just said don't be stupid. Then the next 5 defendants tried the same thing and the judge threw the book progressively harder. Key here is, get to court early so your BS excuse is first. Judge, why do you think showing up to this young lady's home unannounced, after she has made it clear to you she is not romantically interested in you, was an acceptable thing to do? Guy the first was getting a restraining order against, I just wanted to lick the inside of her dog's mouth. There's lots of backstory to this. But let's just say I had a very creepy stalker. Edit, thank you everybody for the love and support. I was the bailiff on a kidnap-rape case. The defendant was pro-per acting as his own attorney. During jury selection he had the option to wear civilian clothing instead of his jail clothes. He chose to remain in his jail attire complete with handcuffs and waist restraints. It came time for him to cross-examine the victim. Understandably, she was very upset before he even started. She was crying and refused to look at him. The defendant's first question went like this. You seem upset. Does it make you nervous to be questioned by the person that raped you? You could hear a pin drop in the courtroom. He was found guilty and sentenced to 46 years to life in prison. Edit ***. Several question about the defendant's motivation about asking the question. He was big guy but definitely not the sharpest knife in the drawer. My personal take was he tried to be questioned by the person you said, accused graped you, and flubbed it. I was talking to a seasoned defense attorney about this story and some others. His take on it was some defendants, for whatever reason, commit suicide by court. Hands down, it's a tie between every sovereign citizen I've seen in court for a simple traffic violation like displaying expired plates or not registering a vehicle. The defense is always a stupid variation of "this court doesn't have jurisdiction because the wrong flag is displayed in the courtroom." Lawyer here bored at work and not wanting to get started on something, so I've seen some very stupid shit. Though I mostly don't do criminal cases, so the stupid shit I tend to see requires a bit of explanation. However, when I was in law school, I worked with a group that helped get restraining orders for people in abusive relationships. Family court in Queens was very much a cattle call situation, and it was easy to watch hearing after hearing, which I always found fun. On one particular day, there were two absolutely amazing hearings. One was a case of two gay men. The guy claiming abuse was a huge man, fat and definitely over 6'4". He was against his tiny partner. At first the magistrate was very incredulous, likely thinking what we were all thinking about the massive size disparity between the two. When the tiny guy got up to speak, he started scolding his larger partner for saying things like that, and at some point, he threw a pen at the bigger man. The bigger guy started to cry, and then the little guy started taunting him. The other involved a man trying to get an ex-parte order against his girlfriend, which is relatively rare. It happens, but the vast majority are women getting them against men. This time, however, before his particular hearing could start, a woman came into the courtroom flanked with two other women. They were all three straight out of central casting for what you'd imagine NYC gang women to look like. They walk in, and see the woman's partner seated in the courtroom, though his hearing wasn't up yet. She immediately starts threatening everyone in the room, but especially the magistrate. The magistrate had them escorted out with the bailiffs, who called in extra. About 30 minutes later, the dude's hearing was up. The magistrate basically immediately granted the restraining order and said he'll put a note in for the full hearing about that woman's conduct. Not a lawyer, but this story comes from a cop. So, they got a call about a guy having sex with a girl in his van. They show up and arrest the guy. He's 20. The girl is 12. When they arrest him, his defense is, "But she told me she was 14. Edit for clarification. This was in Southern California about 7 years ago. Legal age of consent was 15, I believe. So, 14. Still illegal. I was high when my cousin was on a jury for a domestic case. The woman was put in the hospital by her boyfriend. She was in a coma for 18 months and couldn't even appear in court. Apparently the guy pushed her through a door and down the stairs. The guy's defense lawyer was actually trying to get him off with a lighter sentence, but then the guy opened his mouth and tried using the defense of, "If she would have just listened to me about not touching my gum, I wouldn't have gotten so mad. I didn't think the push was strong enough to put her through the door. I didn't mean to put her in a coma. It just happens." When my cousin told me this, I couldn't believe it. He ended up spending 3 years in jail and is no longer allowed to possess weapons. He was deemed mentally incapable of handling such things. I gave testimony as a health professional in a child custody case. The mother wanted to revoke the father's joint physical custody of the 8-year-old girl. The issue was that girl was asked to wipe her father's butt, apply lotion, and wash his genitals. The father's case was that because he was obese, fatigued, suffering from frequent diarrhea, and taxed to take care of his own hygiene without assistance, it was acceptable for her to do this as long as she wore gloves to avoid contracting hepatitis C from him. He also argued that it taught her a lesson about compassion and caring for those unable to do so themselves, and helped them to bond. Truly incredible. Wasn't legit court, just court to change my last name. I was 14 and wanted to change my last name to my stepdad's. My biological father had to be present for the appointment and sign off on it. It went something like this. Judge: "Okay, if everyone will sign here, your name will be changed." Bio: "Dad, I'm not signing." Judge: "Why not?" Bio: "Dad, what if she gets pregnant out of wedlock? I want the baby to have my last name." Reminder that I was 14 years old, had never even kissed a boy, and I hadn't spoken to my dad in at least 5 years. The judge told him that was an irrelevant point and convinced him to sign the paper. I was glad to leave that part of my life behind me that day. I found the girl dead before I raped her. My rapist's lawyer tried to argue that I wanted it. I was 8 when I was assaulted, and had no idea what was going on or what he was doing. Mine is sort of a worst best defense sort of scenario. A few years ago I was doing jury duty at Crown Court in the Old Bailey. Was to judge this gang violence case against a Sri Lankan gang in London. Essentially someone had gotten attacked with a machete in a car park and left for dead. There were 6 suspects in this trial, 2 of which had left the country. What was very clear was that all 6 of these people were in complete cahoots. Every one of these 4 came to trial and blamed one other, so no one got blamed twice. But every one of them got the blame placed on them. Most of the evidence pointed to one of the guys in the trial, or one of the guys that had left the country. We had to vote not guilty because there was so much reasonable doubt against all of them that none of them could be prosecuted. I knew a guy that was charged with pimping a 17-year-old girl. Mind you, he didn't tell anyone he knew she was 17. I won't get into the morality of pimping because that's another subject entirely. But his defense was that he wasn't a pimp. He was a rapper and a drug dealer. Like, why the duck would you admit to being a drug dealer? They threw the book at his ass with like 20 to 26 years. New law for pimping minors. Statutory rape, etc. Edit, he actually was a drug dealer too. So maybe he thought it would work? Lol. But they clearly had recordings of him from jail where he was talking to this girl and outing himself like an idiot. I had a guy come into my jail with a robbery charge. He tried to explain that it was a misunderstanding because he just took a girl's money and kept the weed he was supposed to buy her for himself, so at most he was just a shitty boyfriend. He made his situation worse by throwing in, "Did she tell you we're ducking? She was underage."